What's up, MSFers? I'm Run7, and I wanted to do some coverage on the Nowhere team, give you guys an idea of T4's ISO choices and how much you may want to invest or not invest into the Nowhere team. Now, if you know me, you know I like to ask questions of other people who play with these teams and get some good ideas. So I've reviewed the other content creators' videos, I've asked questions of people smarter than myself, I've bounced some ideas off of rooms in Discord, and this is what I came up with for the Nowhere team.
Yeah, I should probably do something about that.
Let's talk about the team as a whole first. They're bonkers good. They're going to beat everything in war, and I think that the only thing that's going to beat them, at least in the early days, is going to be the mirror match, and it's going to be real tough. So especially at the high end, you're going to be seeing this team on defense, and it's going to get a little bit ridiculous up there. They are an expensive team to run as far as their T4s. I think a few of these characters you could maybe consider their basic a luxury, but the strikers for sure you're going to want to T4 their basics. Everything else is basically needed for this team to function correctly. So you are looking at 20 T4s on this team. That's probably what I'm going to be doing with them. I am going to be investing in this team because they do look like they have a lot of longevity. People are comparing them to like the Infinity Watch, how they're still just a rugged, good, solid team that survives and lasts a long time. I think the character that could be dropped off of this team is Korg, and so let's go over to Korg and check that out. So as we talk about these team members, we're going to be looking at them both on and off of their team so that you guys can decide whether you want to invest in them as a standalone character. Now, Korg doesn't have a lot of value off of his team. He's designed to go in this team, work with the team as a tank. He doesn't have his own taunt in his kit. It's a reflexive taunt when the Nowhere members drop below 50%. And then if he dies, he's revived by the Nowhere members. And that's probably going to be a good thing because he's not as tanky as you would think a rock would be. He's here to be an annoyance, though. He boosts his team by giving them defense up on spawn. He gives deflect to everybody. He barriers himself a little bit, but he rewinds turn meter on his special and his ultimate. And then he also applies slow. He does apply slow on his counter assist. I don't think that's good enough to make him a striker. I think he actually needs to be a skirmisher. In fact, we're going to be seeing a lot of skirmishers and strikers and not too many raiders, and I'll explain why when we get to Cosmon. But for me, I don't think he's the best character on this team. I think he's the weakest link. In fact, I think he's the one you're going to be subbing off. However, he does have lower the counterattack chance of all enemies by 100%, and that's in his standalone kit. So you could pull him off of this team and use him on a hybrid to go into teams like Underworld or the Invaders that do a lot of counterattacking and help stop that initial upfront damage from those teams on a hybrid. Thor is a fantastic looking character with a fantastic looking kit, both on and off his team, both in and outside of war. I think he's great. I think he's incredibly powerful. His special does 400% piercing damage, then rebounds to 3 people for 400 in piercing damage, attacking the most injured enemy for 400 piercing damage. And he's applying an ability block that's unavoidable in war. That's just his opening move, and it gets better from there. Then he has a huge AoE that lands offense down and defense down for 2 turns, doing tons of damage. This character is great. Plus, he's got a really cool tags. Hero Brawler. For you old school people, you know where he's gonna go, right? He also has the Asgardian and the Avenger tag. So do the Young Avengers. So if you're looking to pull, say, America Chavez off of that team, you could put him in place, and he's going to be a great striker on that team, synergizing with Miss Marvel. He has this on enemy turn, 50% chance to attack an enemy protector with the highest speed, ignoring taunt for 250% piercing, and in war, it clears all charges. Goodbye, She-Hulk. That's what that's doing. You're going into that Gamma matchup, and he's clearing those charges, absolutely neutering that team in the way of a cleanse. So he's fantastic there. I really like Thor. I think we want high stars on him. I think he can be used both on this team and off of this team. I can't say enough good things about him. I'm really looking forward to this one. I'm making him a striker striker both on his team and off of his team. I don't want to do a raider like everybody else is saying, and we'll get to that toward the end of the video. Next up, my boy StarLord. Now, I love StarLord as a character in the comics and the movies. In this game, in fact, I think he's a lot of fun, has some cool kits, and the Annihilation version is no different. They gave him something special. Now, he's not a battery anymore, but what he is doing is applying vulnerable via his kit. In fact, you can make him a striker, and he can apply his own vulnerable and do his own striker basic attack, which is really cool. However, I'm thinking about making him a skirmisher because I think it's going to be very important to get lots of vulnerables on the field for both Nova and Thor to do their striker attacks off of. He has in his kit, of course, Revive Korg on his basic, like everybody in the team does. In war, if Nova is an ally, clear immunity from the primary target and the highest damage non-primary target. In war, apply blind for 2 turns to the highest damage non-primary enemy. That's going to be blinding Red Hulk when you go into the Gamma matchup, so that Red Hulk will be doing his big ultimate blind and won't do as much damage. He also applies trauma to each target with vulnerable off of his ultimate, so that's really good. Again, that's in war. And he gets extra focus on his moves. He gets offense down for 2 turns to all enemies on spawn in war. Lots of really neat war things that go on. However, outside of war, outside of his kit, he's not very, he's not a shining star anymore. He's still applying some vulnerables in his kit, so you can still use him as a striker for double tapping off of his own vulnerables, or as a skirmisher for applying stacks of vulnerables if you want. He's still blinding people, and he's still got a heal block for 2 turns on his ultimate, so you can still use him as a scalpel in a lot of places. I just don't see him doing anything crazy good that other people can't do aside from the vulnerables outside, out of his kit, which is actually really powerful. So I still like him a lot as a sort of plug and play character, but I think he's going to be staying on the team. This team is going to need somebody to be putting out lots of vulnerables so that Nova has the opportunity to put out some serious damage, so that Thor has the opportunity to double tap, put out damage and defense down. So I like him on the team. I think I'm going to be making him a skirmisher, but you could go striker on this character, and he would not be using up any of the vulnerables that he attacks into because he leaves one behind when he's all done. So next up we have Nova. He's the linchpin of the team. Of course, he's the legendary. We're gonna have to go through a Scourge to get him. He's going to be crazy good. His stats are good. He's really fast, one of the first ones to go on the team. In war, he really pops off with lots of extra features like this one. In war, while this character has charged, any nowhere ally or self with safeguard cannot have trauma applied to them. So if you were thinking about going into this with like a Weapon X, making a trauma stick to them to keep them disrupted so they can't cleanse it off or can't get a taunt up on Korg or something like that, forget about it. You can't apply trauma to this team. And in his special and his ultimate, he's reapplying safeguard to self and all allies. His battlefield effect is crazy good. I think it's really well balanced. Just as this team, like they come out and they hit big with their specials, then their ultimates, and they really do some damage, knock the opponent on their heels, and then you're like, oh, okay, that's it. And they have these long cooldowns. That's okay because the battlefield goes into effect. It's giving them lots of defense with those deflects, and it's basically giving the entire team an extra 50% damage. It's really cool. So they really just continue to pummel the enemy. And of course, that's going to clear that Red Hulk battlefield effect if that one goes off first. All about the timing on those matchups, whether you're going into them or going against them. All right, his basic ISO attack clears 2 positive effects from the enemy, 4 in war. I'm making him a striker for that. Plus, he's just got amazing damage, and so you really want him to just strip the enemy clean of all their positive effects and pummel them. So that's a real good way to go on that. He's fantastic. He's gonna be the primary target that you want to kill. Whether or not you can, I don't know. I'm seeing from some of the testing that he is very rugged. We might have to switch to Cosmo as our first kill order instead of him, but you do want him to die as fast as possible. I just don't know if it's going to be possible. He does spawn with 1 charged outside of war, 3 charges instead in war, and of course in war he fills his speed bar for himself and 15% for each nowhere ally, so that's one reason why he's popping off real fast in in war. And finally, it's everyone's favorite cosmonaut, Cosmo. She is a really fantastic character on this team. I'm not sure how useful she will be outside of it. She kind of functions like a squirrel girl, clearing all the negative effects from self and all allies, clear all positive effects from all enemies, then healing herself. Now that's happening outside of her team. That's why you might want to be using her as a healer elsewhere. However, her special and her ultimate have very long cooldowns. You kind of want to be thinking about that if you are setting her up on some sort of a hybrid defense, because once that finishes, she's not getting enough energy to be much value there. So it's just kind of like upfront sustain for wherever you use her outside of the team. But here's the reason, she is the reason why I'm not using any raiders on the team. And that's because while this character has deflect or minor deflect, lower the crit chance of all enemies by 50%. And one of the things we're going to be doing to beat this team on defense is using this team on offense. And so I just feel like putting raider tags on your characters isn't going to get the value that you want out of it, because she's removing most of the benefit from that tag, and getting the extra damage out of a striker tag or placing an extra vulnerable for the strikers that you do have is going to be the way to go. Now she's still of course a lot better on her team and in war. She gets the extra focus in war. Attacks are unavoidable in war, or at least her special is. She also applies Safeguard to self and all nowhere allies, and generates ability energy for self and all nowhere allies on her ultimate. So that helps a little bit. And then, of course, on spawn gain immunity, that's huge. So I really think that she's going to belong on this team. She's going to make this team very challenging because of all the different positive and negative effects that she's cleansing and stripping off of the enemy. So a real stubborn character. I'm going to be making her a skirmisher for the extra vulnerables. You could make, there's a case to be made for making her a healer, but that ISO is just not that important. And I think it's going to be better to have vulnerables on the field for Nova to attack in, double tap, and strip positive effects from. You're going to get a lot more value there. So to review, I like Thor and Nova as strikers, everyone else as skirmishers, primarily because I think that early on we're going to be doing a lot of mirror matches, and you're going to want vulnerables for the most powerful hitters so you can clear the field. You're going to want that defense down of Thor's to land because you need to start clipping off their members faster. I think that it's going to be a toss-up between Nova or Cosmo that is your kill order. If you can somehow kill Korg and not get him to revive, maybe that's going to be a thing. But for right now, I think it's probably just take out Cosmo as fast as you can, and then work your way around to getting rid of Nova, hopefully before he lays out that battlefield effect. It is going to be a bit of a slog. I think this team is going to be valuable in all game modes. I think a lot of these characters do have some plug and play value. Korg, not so much. He's pretty niche, but I see ways that you could use Nova, Thor, and even Cosmo for sure on some hybrid teams. I think that this team has a lot baked into their kits so that they are going to be a valuable team for a very long time. War teams tend to last a little bit longer than other stuff. Nova, of course, a great pick for Dark Dimension 6. And I think because they should have that long-term value, hopefully Scopely doesn't just immediately sell us a team that blows this thing out of the water. But because of their long-term value, I do think it is worth the investment to put lots of T4s in this team. Not to mention, they look like a lot of fun. It looks like you get to pick and choose between specials and ultimates or basic attacks. So it could be fun to control them. It's going to be interesting going into those mirror matches. Dorky Dad says it's a lot like playing the Gamma matchup where things can go sideways. I'm not sure that placement is going to matter too much. He likes Nova next to Korg, but I'm not sure if that's a good choice. I might be putting StarLord next to Korg. I'm not sure. StarLord a little bit flimsier, but less important for things to happen. This team has lots of evades, so the blinds aren't that important. However, you will be going into some teams that have unavoidable attacks, so who knows? Maybe you're going to want that. I like this team. In fact, I kind of love this team. I think they're great, and if you watch some of the other content creators, you're going to see some major punch-ups Dorky Dad runs them at lower power levels with all the T4s and does some major punch-ups. Mr. Hargrave brings up their power levels way high but doesn't do any of the T4s, and you'll see how they kind of struggle without those T4s. They're pretty necessary if you read those kits. You know, that T4 has some really important features in it. So it is going to be a bit of an expensive T4 team, but I don't think you're going to need to dump too much gear into them. I have no idea how they're unlocking, when they're unlocking, or how hard that struggle will be to unlock them, but I recommend you try your best. Big shout out to Pathfinder Gaming and Benny Westside for bouncing some ideas around and doing some initial research on these teams. I'll put links to some infographics of Benny Westside down below, along with some links to some other content creators who I stole some ideas from. Be sure to compare and contrast with other content creators. We all make different teams, play in different ways, and have rosters at different sizes. And by the way, if you liked any of this content, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more videos, and I'll see you next time. I'm Run7, and I don't have an outro yet. Real quick shout out to Benny Westside and Pathfinder Gaming who helped bounce some ideas around for me, and all the content creators who already put out their videos. They've got some great stuff. Be sure to check those guys. There's a mouse on my screen.